Cindy.
Oh, Cindy B.
Yeah.
Good morning, Dr. B.
Oh my gosh, we have to behave ourselves now. Mom's in the house.
Rachel, sit up, smile,
nothing's ever made
get
you
your lips
behave
on right.
before.
In fact, I believe we have on the only Olympic athlete, U.S. national
This is
champion,
awesome.
who is now a PhD candidate I've ever had
Love
the
it.
10
pleasure
seconds.
of meeting.
Love it, and love it.
Yeah.
Welcome back to JP, Kathy, and the crew here on 1160 AM, KBDT News Talk Sports. Of course, we are so happy to have here this morning our mental health moment. For those of you who are new to the show, welcome, and we encourage you to tune in every day to 1160 AM KBDT 24/7. Great shows from morning till night, all throughout the weekend. But we're really proud here at JP, Kathy, and the crew of our mental health moment that we have every Tuesday. And we have that with the gracious, lovely hard work of Stephen Dunn of the Morgan Foundation and Patty Giolot of the Something for Kelly Foundation. And we are just super excited. This is a really special show. And we tackle mental health from several different points of view, because you never know, mental health impacts so many people in so many different ways, and so many families and so many people's loved ones, that we always hope that each time we have a new guest on, that maybe we hit a unique target audience. And
Yep.
and Patty, I think, and I'm going to let you introduce our special guest today. I think this is a very unique mental health moment for us.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I do agree with you. Yes, that's exactly what we try to do, is touch on a lot of different audiences. We're going to jump right into it because we have so much to talk about today. We're very excited to have Rachael Flatt with us. She has an amazing background, and I'm going to just invite you, Rachael, to tell us a little bit about your background and how you're connected to mental health and the world of eating disorders.
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Patty, and thanks for having me on this morning. I'm so excited to be with you all. Just a quick intro about myself. I was the 2010 U.S. Ladies Figure Skating National Champion, and I was on the Olympic team back in Vancouver. And after I graduated from Stanford University in 2015, I decided to pursue a PhD in clinical psychology. So now I'm officially a Tar Heel at UNC Chapel Hill.
Yay.
And entering my third year in the program. So it's been great.
We are so excited to have you on the show today. Tell us a little bit about your background with mental health, if you would.
Sure. So I am quite heavily invested in mental health research, obviously, now that I'm in a clinical psychology PhD program, and also gaining practical skills as a future clinician. But I dealt with a number of mental health issues when I was competing, and saw a number of my peers struggle as well. Something that we'll be talking about a lot today is body image and eating disorders. And I certainly struggled with body image throughout my career. Being an elite level figure skater, that's not uncommon. But I saw a number of my peers struggle with eating disorders, and so that really led me to kind of pursue this full time. And now I'm in an extremely lucky and fortunate position to be pursuing this as a career in psychology, and help improve prevention and treatment efforts for future athletes.
Right now, you've been invited to serve on a place or position with the Mental Health Task Force for the U.S. Olympic and Paralympics. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you're doing with that role? That's especially new, and I'm excited and proud for you to be invited onto that.
Yeah, so I am one of 4 athlete representatives on the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee's Mental Health Task Force. And essentially what we are charged with is identifying and aggregating resources and really developing protocols and, just any kind of support available for Olympic and Paralympic level athletes. And eventually this will start trickling down to, various national sport governing bodies. So we're doing everything from identifying digital mental health tools that can access folks who don't traditionally have the option to pursue healthcare or mental health care treatment, all the way to, making sure that when an athlete has a mental health crisis at an Olympic or Paralympic Games, and they're in a country that doesn't recognize mental health or psychiatric disorders as a concern, making sure that they are able to be supported in the ways that they need. So we've got quite a few things that we're working on, but they're keeping us busy.
That's really important, Rachel. I think you have a special story that if you're comfortable sharing it, I'd like to invite you to share it. And could you please talk a little bit about your history, mental health, your history with the sport itself, and why you were drawn toward the world of mental health and eating disorders?
Sure, absolutely. So I kind of alluded to this, but, being at the top of your sport, you are really exposed to lots of different feedback from a lot of different people. And by the time I was 13, 14 years old, I was getting feedback about my physique. And, I wasn't your typical figure skater in terms of my look. I wasn't extremely thin and svelte. Instead, I looked like a more athletic build. And, I was healthy and strong. And, leading into my first world championships in Los Angeles, I was told a week out that I needed to drop 20 pounds. I've been told when I was going through puberty, actually, that from a coach that, gosh, it would be so much easier for you to perform your programs if you lost that sack of potatoes on your body and your scores would go up. So it's any type of comment you can imagine, I've probably heard it. But that really impacted my perception of my physique, and it just really didn't equate for me that the fact that my body looked a little bit different was going to be impacting my scores, even when I was the most consistent U.S. figure skater at that point in time. And I was, hitting all of my skills, doing all of my programs without mistakes, and so that really impacted my perception. But thankfully for my parents, they really helped me understand that, my performances and my success was not to be at the expense of my mental health or my physical health. So I think without them, I could have gone down a very different path. But, I saw a lot of my peers struggle with that. And now I'm in a position where I can, help these future athletes and make sure that we're really changing the culture of mental health in sports.
I think what you said is really important, so I want to just give a minute to emphasize that. Rachel, you were not at the bottom of the team. You were not at the end of the gap. It's not as though you were underperforming. I don't know if the audience really caught the gist of this. You were at the top of your game. You were highly competitive. You were performing very well. And so it wasn't like the coach was trying to help you improve your game. Is that right? You said that you were making all of your marks. You were making all of your moves. You were doing everything they asked of you as it relates to your performance, but it was some kind of an aesthetic. They just were looking at you from a, hey, what does the form look like? What does the body look like? And that was sort of giving you a thought of shame that you didn't otherwise have. Is that what you're saying? You were otherwise performing very well?
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. It just was amazing to me that my programs and my routines weren't speaking for themselves. Instead what I was being told was that, no, actually, in fact, it's how your body looks. That's the most important thing, and those are the things that we're critiquing you on. So that's a pretty damaging thing to be hearing at such a malleable age, in your young teen or mid-teens as well. So, that really shaped my view of what was perceived to be successful in the sport. But fortunately, now that I'm retired and have put some distance there, I can say, oh gosh, okay, this was not the right thing, to be hearing. And so how can we change this moving forward? So that's what I'm really excited to be working on, in grad school and beyond.
That's really critically important. For a couple of quick points here. One, this was not something that you in your young mind dreamed up and all of a sudden started saying, I'm not good enough, I don't like the way that I look. You weren't putting all of that shame or burden on yourself. You had some adults saying that to you. You had your critics, you had some observers. I don't want to even call them fans because I would not call them fans. You had judges and coaches and other adults. I heard you in an interview the other day with Dr. Bulik, who, by the way, thank you for joining us this morning, Dr. B. We see you on the show. I saw you in an interview with Dr. B the other day saying something about what would have been helpful if you would have been able to do it in your younger day, and that you would recommend that to somebody today. And I think that was critically important. The point about if you had said then what you could have said today, what would that have been?
Yeah, I think there were two things. One is, being able to seek help from a trusted adult in those moments when you hear some really negative feedback about yourself or something that is, really troublesome. But the other piece is being able to say to that person and feel empowered to do so is to say, look, I think what you're saying is pretty harmful to me right now, and so I'm going to walk away from that conversation. And I think because there's quite often this power dynamic in sports, and that's kind of mirrored in a lot of the relationships that we have in our broader society, people don't really feel empowered to say those kinds of things and be able to walk away from those kinds of conversations. So I think looking back, that was something that I learned that I need to do to take care of myself and keep myself healthy.
Thank you so much, Rachael. I think that that's critically important, and I did want to get that message out. But now, speaking of Dr. Bulik, Something for Kelly is a big fan of your work out there at UNC. And Dr. Bulik introduced some results from a study last year at one of our events regarding anorexia and its intersection with genetics. We are getting ready to launch. We're launching, not getting ready to launch. Dr. Bulik is launching, and you're a big part of something that is a platform that is being built upon this study, which was referred to as Angie, this new study on eating disorders and genetics initiative. Would you talk a bit about that? Because you're on that team and you're very integral to everything that is going to be about.
Sure thing. So we just launched a study about a week and a half ago, and we are thrilled about this. It's going to wind up being the largest eating disorder trial ever. But essentially what we're doing is building off of Angie's results and characterizing the genome for individuals who have an eating disorder, whether it is anorexia nervosa, binge eating disorder, or bulimia nervosa. And what we're particularly interested in are areas of the genome that are associated with each of those disorders so that we can better understand how best to treat those folks. Because, our treatments are good right now, but we still have a high rate of relapse. And so there's still, and a lot of folks deal with these disorders for, many years at a time. And so we really want to make sure that the way we're targeting these treatments and these preventions really makes sense with what we know about the biological, bases of these disorders.
Rachael, let's kind of deconstruct this for a minute, because people who are deeply involved in the world of eating disorders kind of understand some of the dynamic around this. But for people who are aware of mental health and eating disorders but not deeply involved in it, they may not understand the genetic intersection. So for folks who kind of assume that this is a lifestyle choice, or that this is primarily based upon social media or bullying or young girls trying to be modeled like thin, talk about what the genetic component means in a layman's term. I mean, we have a very intelligent audience, but they may not be at the PhD level as it relates to mental health.
Right. And I think to your point, one of the most important things as researchers is to make sure that what we're doing actually makes sense to the layman. So to kind of put it in different terms, we know from the research that there are truly, pieces that place folks at risk both in the environment and in the biological sense. So, if you think about kind of my situation where I was exposed to a lot of negative feedback about my physique, or, if someone is bullied about their weight or their shape, that certainly places them at risk of developing an eating disorder, but that's not the only piece to this. Now, it's the same thing with the genetic and the biological component. You can certainly have, genes or regions of the genome that may place you at greater risk for developing an eating disorder, but it's not going to be the only thing that kind of determines whether or not you're going to develop an eating disorder down the line. So essentially what we're trying to do with EDGI is identify those areas, but also see what else is associated with these disorders. So for instance, real quick, just with Angie, we found that not only is anorexia nervosa associated with the psychological piece, but also the metabolism.
And Rachel, we're gonna put a pause on that, and let's come back. And Patty, what are we going to talk about with Rachel when we come back?
We're going to talk about what we anticipate, what we hope to get out of the results of EDGI. I think that's real important.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Rachel, thank you so much. Hang in there with us. We're JP, Kathy, and the crew. We come to you live from 7 to 9 every Monday through Friday, and we're always so super excited to have in studio Patty Giolot and Stephen Dunn, and then we've got our special guest, Rachael Flatt, today. We've got the mental health moment. This is a must tune in every week, because there's somebody out there. If you're not the one hurting, you know somebody who is. And we encourage you to share our Facebook post with them. And we encourage you to stay tuned. We'll be back on 1160 AM, KBDT, News Talk Sports. Who knew I could still do that?
Wow, that was smooth.
I mean, she nailed it right down to the second.
And I was literally over there watching 2-1. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
I was watching it too, Kathy. You go, girl.
Rachel, while we are off the air here, but we're still on Facebook Live, let me ask you a little bit of a stirring the pot, controversial question, perhaps, because that's so unusual for me, of course.
Stirring the pot. Put your hat on, Rachel.
There have been past complaints
All right,
about
I'm buckling up.
Okay, so there have been past complaints about the research community that they're too focused on the skinny white girls, the anorexic. In fact, one organization yesterday came out and said that the eating disorder community has systemic oppression, and they repented for that. In any event, what is
you've got to shoot me that way.
What is EDGI going to do to be more inclusive of different races and body sizes and cultures, so that those type of arguments that have been made in the past cannot be made on this type of study?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you make a fantastic point, because, you know, just in academia as well as our society right now, and this is something that we're clearly reckoning with, is the fact that, you know, there is a discrepancy in representation. And unfortunately, in academia, you know, we really have struggled in the past to get representative samples in our studies. And so something that we are really trying to change is, especially with EDGI, is making sure that we are recruiting participants from all walks of life, whether that's, you know, racial, ethnic, gender, you know, socioeconomic status, like any walk of life, really. We're trying to make sure that we reach those folks, not to place the burden on them to be a part of the study, but really just so that we can make sure that what we do is actually reflective of our society and our makeup, and anyone who, you know, has had or currently has an eating disorder. So we are really reaching out, and obviously not able to do as much face-to-face outreach, given the shelter-at-home orders and the phases right now. But
Okay,
you know,
so
obviously we're trying to do a lot of social media research or outreach at that point.
Okay, so when you say outreach, are you specifically reaching out to entities like churches and community centers, the people, the places that people ordinarily would not think about? You know, what are you specifically doing to be more inclusive in this?
Yeah, so we are, you know, pretty much game for anything. We are, you know, reaching out to folks who, you know, through Facebook groups, through listservs, you know, to any community that really is underrepresented, and making sure that they are fairly represented in these studies. And this is something that we are strongly committed to as a lab, and you know, we're really excited about that. I think this is a great piece of work that we can do and can contribute. So we're pretty excited about it.
I know that diversity aspect is something that Dr. Bulik and I have spoken about on numerous occasions, and it's very important to both Something for Kelly and to Dr. Bulik. So anything that you all put together, any creative ideas that you want to share with us so that we can then push them out to other organizations, please do that, because I think it's important that all of us know the
10
kinds of
seconds.
things we can do.
And we're about to go back on air.
No, absolutely. We will.
All right, welcome back to JP, Kathy, and the crew here on 1160 AM, KBDT News Talk Sports. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. Don't miss the Wells Report with our own John David Wells this afternoon and every afternoon from 2 to 5 only on 1160 AM, KBDT News Talk Sports. Headed towards a high of 86 today, a low of 74. It's supposed to be stormy today. We'll see. Mild tonight. Currently, we are at 77 degrees here in the Dallas area. We're finishing up our mental health moment, and we've got Rachael Flatt, who is an athlete extraordinaire, let's just say that, and a leading advocate for eating disorders and helping those who have that. Patty, let's talk a little bit more with Rachael.
Thank you, Kathy. Once again, Rachael, we're so excited to have you here. We always end our show with what we can do to offer hope and encouragement to people. And can you talk a little bit about what you anticipate we can get out of Edgy, since you do know some of what we got out of Angie? What could we be building upon? What could you anticipate, whether it's standards of care, information for patients, help for the parents, siblings? Talk to us about what we might get as a result of Angie several years down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I was mentioning before we went on the break, Angie really led us to understand that anorexia nervosa not only has kind of a psychological component in the biological base, but also a metabolic component. And so for us, that's really helping us reconceptualize the disorder. And honestly, it makes complete sense with how the disorder presents. We have folks who are able to maintain a really low weight for quite some time. And so, which a lot of folks are not able to do. And so what we are hoping to understand is get, either a similar type of finding or, just help us better understand really what is at the core of binge type disorder. So bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder. And for us, that will really help us understand, how best we can target treatment, improve our treatments, make sure that they are long lasting. And, I hope, if anything, that for folks who think that, eating disorders are a choice, it's really actually alleviating some of that burden and knowing that there really is a biological base to this, and it's part of who you are to some extent. So, so that's what we're working on.
So, Rachael, as it relates to this layering in of additional eating disorders, so Angie focused on anorexia. Edgy is going to enhance the population and become more diversified with your sampling, including binge eating and bulimia. So talk about the additional demographic that you're going to be layering in and what you might get from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially what we are hoping to do is kind of get at the most commonly researched eating disorders. And, obviously we have quite a range of folks who have or have had these eating disorders. And as we know from the research, the eating disorders do not discriminate based on race, ethnicity, gender, SES, etc. So, it really does impact folks around the world and around the U.S. So we are really excited to be including bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder on this kind of journey. It's going to be a large study, and I think for us it's just going to help us really support not only the patients but their families in treating these disorders.
Rachael, one of the things that Something for Kelly is committed to is bridging the gap between science and solutions. We note that the distance between science and the information getting to treatment practitioners and patients is on average 17 years. I find that to be totally unacceptable in the 20th century, and in the 21st century this is just deplorable. How are we going to help to bridge that gap with some of these results?
Honestly, it's by doing some things like this, by making sure that we communicate these results, on programs like this, to make sure that, that folks are understanding the importance not only of these studies, but the research and the disorders, but also so that there's a better community and society level understanding of psychiatric disorders and how we can help support those in need.
Well, Rachael, thank you so much for joining us today for our mental health moment. If you're on Facebook, you can hop on JP, Kathy, and the crew, and you can comment. I know we've got some people who have been chiming in, and you might be the lifesaver that they need. And we really do appreciate you and wish you all the best, and would love to have you back on the show again, Rachael.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
All right, have a blessed day. And Patty and Steve, love you guys. So glad to see
Thanks,
y'all again,
Kathy.
and just keep up the great work. And everybody, make sure you tune in to JP, Kathy, and the crew. Not just Tuesdays for the mental health moment, but every Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 a.m. Have a blessed day, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachael. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. B.
All right, thank you, Rachael. That was a great job.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Rachael, we're still on Facebook, and even though we're not on the air anymore, I always like to ask as well, is there anything that you wanted to say this morning that we didn't get a chance to say earlier?
Oh gosh, let me think. We covered a lot.
Well, we were rapid fire going at you.
No, honestly, if you are interested in participating in EDGI, please do so. It is just a simple saliva swab and answering a couple questionnaires online, and you can certainly find us on every social media platform at EDGI Study, so that's at EDGI Study. And we just are really excited about this study again. And also I just wanted to say thank you again for having me on. It's really what you all are doing to highlight mental health concerns and just improve support and improve a kind of community level knowledge about this is just so important. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you.
And to
Thank
echo
you.
Kathy's comment, we will have you back as the EDGI program
Yes.
rolls out. Right now we are in the initial stages, which is trying to get people to sign up for it. Something for Kelly is going to be doing some outreach, and we're going to coordinate with Dr. Bulik and Rachael and her team, their team, to get people to join and to participate. So edgy.org, EDGI, Eating Disorders Genetics Initiative.org, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So we definitely want to encourage people to participate and check out.
Right. Rachael, Steve Dunnigan here. Because the question I asked you before really wasn't controversial enough, let me see if I can ask you a slightly more controversial
It was also
one.
lovely. And now where are we going?
I know, it's what I do.
Take that microphone away from him.
I know, yeah, how to shut it down.
Is there a way to get the treatment centers out there, the big multi-state treatment centers, to invest in what you're doing there? So, for example, how is the research you're doing going to result in better, more effective treatment protocols for our clinicians out there?
Sure, that's a great question. And like I said earlier, the point of our research is not only to do good science, but to actually make it meaningful to other researchers, to clinicians, to practitioners, to families, et cetera. So, for us, what we kind of see as the potential here is by understanding some of these biological bases, and eventually this could build out to certain biological mechanisms, and not only will this again alleviate to some extent the psychological kind of pressure and shame to some extent for folks who think this is a choice, but this could actually lead to better treatments in the terms of either targeted drug trials or medications or, different nutrient level diets for folks who are trying to adjust kind of their eating habits. And, there will be a lot of different ways that we could angle this. But again, this really depends on the findings that we get. But knowing what we know now about anorexia nervosa, for instance, from Angie, there will be a little bit more information related to kind of the metabolic piece as well. So who knows, we may be able to do something along the lines again or along those same lines for binge type disorders. But again, it just really, really depends on what we find.
And I mean, and like binge disorders, like binge drinking, anything that you go overboard on, gambling, things like that. I mean, are you talking about the same kind of trip in your mind? Like for people who gamble too much or compulsively spend or have binge alcohol drinking?
Right. So
I don't know. Y'all are the experts.
Yeah.
I'm asking y'all. I'm having to like, I don't know.
Binge eating, binge eating disorders defined in the DSM-5 certain ways. You binge a number of times per day or per week, and when you do that, then there's a pretty defined definition of that.
Just specifically for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because you've got other mental health disorders
Right.
that revolve around binge spending, binge
Right.
alcoholism, all that kind of stuff. Is there somewhere in the brain that's tripped? I mean, again, we don't know. I mean,
and I've given a TEDx talk on eating disorders in the brain, and we believe, in fact, this would be a great question for Dr. Carrie McAdams at UT Southwestern. She really goes into it, but as I understand it, there are certain areas of the brain that are specifically impacted.
just with the eating disorder thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they react differently, whether it's anorexia or bulimia or binge eating
Right.
disorder. That sort of thing.
And that's another thing
Fascinating.
that ever since I've started hanging out with y'all that I've realized I didn't know there were. I just always thought, bulimia, anorexia, all kind of the same thing until I met you two, and y'all were like,
No, definitely.
let me tell you, there's a huge difference just within that whole realm.
But and keep in mind, I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on TV,
Oh,
and I
Lord,
did
no.
not stay in the Holiday Inn Express. Dr. B and Rachel, I'm sure, has all this information. But anyway, I'm off the air because I'm not supposed to talk. But Rachel, thank you so much for.
We really appreciate you, Rachel. That was a great interview. Thank you so much
you.
for all you're doing.
Thank you, Rachel. And,
Thank you again.
And good luck on all of your studies, and let's stay connected on the
Yes.
work with EDGI, because I think that that's going to be really critical going forward. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you
right.
so much, all.
Thanks,
This was
Rachel.
great.
Have a good one. All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye. Bye to the crew on Facebook. Love y'all. And JP and I will see y'all tomorrow. Oh, Gail, you have a blessed day too. Oh, and I'm so glad Dr. B put she put all the links in there. So excellent, excellent, excellent. She's so good. All right. Love y'all. Glad to be back. Glad to hang out with the crew again.
So happy to see you again, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great too.
Yeah.
Good to
Just
see you're
was
not diseased.